Welcome back to the lathe restoration video. You can see here, I'm going to try and keep this brief in this episode. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to take the rear cover off for the gear sets at the back. I'm not quite sure what the name for these gears are, but I'm sure someone out there will know. So I'm just taking the cover off first. It's also got a couple of safeties on this section and a couple of the other doors, which I'm going to remove because they won't tie in with the inverter route that we're taking anyway, and all this is going to have to be come off to be stripped back and repainted. It's very dirty. You can see it's had a lot of use over the years. This is one of the sensors I was on about, so when the door is open at the back, the lathe actually won't work. It's all wired into one circuit. So it's actually a mixture of metric and imperial fixings. I'm just loosening the back plate bolts off while I try and pull the gears off for the thread cutting gearbox. This was on some, so you can see I'm using the stop on the headstock just to stop the gears from turning, and I'm just very gently prying the gears to pull them off. All the grease has turned to like an adhesive, it's really sticky. So just pulling these two gears off, and then I remove the key as well. Probably see here it's not had a good clean for some time, and this is one of the reasons why I want to completely strip this thing down so I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I'm just taking the rest of the gears off here, just taking my time, making sure everything's pulled off in sequence, and then when I'm pulling these pieces off I'm just keeping them separate from one another. And then what I'll probably do is when I reassemble the lathe is do these bits in sections, and they'll get a good clean and re-grease before they go back on. So I'm actually using a 7/16 socket to remove these 3 bolts which hold the panel on. And then this next bit, it was an absolute pain. This sensor, the way they'd been fixed onto the lathe, all the fixings were rusted and corroded solid, and a lot of the screws as they went through the back plate, they were actually bent, so I was struggling to get them off. You'll see I'm just taking my time here just to make sure everything comes off cleanly. I don't want to damage anything, but these wires will not be going back on at all. I'm also trying to capture everything that I'm doing, just because there's not a lot of information out there when you look for Boxford AUD. There's people turning things on the lathe and stuff like that, but no real sort of literature on how to take these things apart, or the best way to disassemble them, or what process to do this in. So if you do have a Boxford AUD and you're looking for sort of a guide to help you take this thing apart, then I'll do my best to capture every little bit and section. If for some reason I haven't got it on camera, I'll of course let you know how I went about taking it apart. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this next step. This is a bit of a drastic measure, but because I'm not going to be using this wire, and at the moment I'm struggling to get the wires off without getting the rest of the lathe apart, I know this part's not going to go back on, so I literally just cut the wires off, which just speeds the process up a little bit of taking this thing apart. Another drastic measure here. Again, I'm not going to be reusing this belt. It's heavily worn. I'm going to put a new one on there. So for time's sake, I'm just using some metal shears, and I'm just going to cut through the belt and remove it, just because it's not going to go back on the machine. It wouldn't be a full restoration without replacing this part and maybe the other belts anyway. So to save myself some time and a lot of effort, I'm just going to cut this thing off, and you'll see why in just a moment. The more I take this apart, the more I'm sort of justified in the full restoration of this machine. There's wood screws, there's all kinds of crap and debris behind the machine and God knows where else. So taking this down and doing a full restoration is going to be worth it for the things that I'm going to use the machine for. I'm just pulling the rest of the wires out here. This whole thing is connected, so you have 3 or 4, can't quite remember, safeties. So you've got one on the back door that I've removed. There's one on the front of the headstock, which I'm not too sure how it works. Something to do with the back gear, I think. And there's also a third with the door where the motor is. If any one of these doors or bits are open, then the machine will not function. They will have to be closed for safety. And that would probably solidify where this thing's come from, a college. They obviously don't want the students to get injured in any way. And here I'm just removing the second safety function switch, or whatever it is for. I'm not too sure, to be honest. It was connected in the same loom as the safety switch on the back door. So I'm just getting rid of these wires, pulling them all out. They're not going to work with the inverter anyway, so there's no real need to keep them. It's only going to be myself using this machine. But I fully understand why they'd have these safety mechanisms if, let's say, they've got students or pupils unattended for a short period of time. They don't want their hands caught in any gearing. I didn't have the correct spanner for this next part, and it was very difficult to get any other tool in there. So what I ended up actually doing was taking a 14mm spanner that I had spare, and then just using the grinder just to open it slightly, just so I could get the torsion off these 2 bolts on the headstock. And then I went in there with a little adjustable that I got, which was quite a little nifty tool because it got into a small space, and was able to loosen these bolts off. The video won't show how long I fumbled with this to try and get this off, but obviously, of course, when this goes back together, I'll just pick up a set of Imperial spanners, as I don't have any to hand, and then we can assemble it the correct way. Jesus Christ. With the headstock out of the way, we can now remove the thread cutting gearbox and lead screw. The thread cutting gearbox is pretty much straightforward. 3 Allen bolts, loosen them off, just support the weight of the thread cutting gearbox, and then it will drop down. However, how to get the lead screw out, I'm not too sure. It looks like there's a pin driven through the housing where it fits into. If anyone knows how this thing comes apart, just let me know down in the comments below. I obviously don't want to break anything, so I don't want to start smashing anything with a hammer too hard. But apart from that, it came off pretty damn easy. Now I'm just removing the bolts for the bed. The bolts came out pretty much easy enough, but the bed was fixed with an adhesive sealant that Boxford obviously put on when the lathe was first built. Now I had to jump onto the lathe owners group on Facebook and just ask a bit of advice here, because I wasn't too sure how to safely get the bed unstuck from the stand. Brilliant group. Straight away they basically recommended putting a piece of wood through underneath the bed and then using like a wooden wedge to just tapping it in to lift it up. This worked a treat. Didn't actually get this on camera because I had to go away, ask the question the night before, find out what the answer was, and then I just came down in my own time and removed the bed. But the rest of the bits I need to do beforehand is obviously removing the rest of the wires. Isn't the most sort of interesting content, but nonetheless it's got to be done. If you see any of these parts that I'm actually taking off the machine, like this fuse box here, that I have no intention of reusing, if you have a use for this stuff, just get in touch. The spares will be available. Obviously some of the boxes that sit on the front I want to keep, just to keep the big holes in the stand covered up. But I'm just removing the rest of the wiring here, the last few remnants of wire. Not the most interesting episode again. Obviously the next episode we're going to be stripping the paint off and getting to repainting this thing. But thanks for tuning into this video. We're pretty much almost there now with the strip down. It's just taking the motor out, which will be in the next part. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.